laziness, procrastination. How many of you out there deal with that on a fairly regular basis of procrastinating and putting things off? And how many of you have found that your spiritual methods or techniques or meditation really don't get to that? Like for many years, I would do very, very skillful practices around who am I, what am I, and then I would get off the mat or the couch where I'm doing inquiry, and I would notice that I would go sit in a chair, and I'd be like, I don't really want to do anything. I don't want to work. I don't want to go to the grocery store. I don't want to pay the bills now. I'm going to pay them later. And sometimes we justify that like as a result of our spiritual practice. Like, well, I'm recognizing that there's nothing to do. There's nowhere to go. And so I'm just going to sit here. And we kind of sit there not knowing that sitting there is both maybe a combination of our clarity, which is like, we don't need anything in this moment. That kind of clarity. Everything is fine as it is. That gets mixed in with some deep unconscious conditioning around procrastination and laziness for some people that actually goes back to childhood emotional stuff. For years, we've heard that like if I'm procrastinating, then I need to pull myself up and just get out there and get a job and do this or that. Or we say that about other people. Like if she would just get up and do something, then her life would change. But there's research and studies now and articles coming out, and you can Google them. Just Google procrastination, laziness, emotional regulation, trauma. You'll see them. And essentially what we're now realizing, which we've seen in these inquiries for years, is that laziness and procrastination, these are emotional issues, actually. They're not moral issues. It's not an issue of, it's an emotional issue. And when we take people into inquiry on these issues, what we find is it easily goes back to mom and dad and the stories that we've been telling ourselves from childhood around being deficient or not feeling like we match up to others, and things like a deep sense of needing to hold back in life, like our energy is being held back because we're trying to stay safe. All sorts of unconscious programming behind the laziness or procrastination, and you can't see it. It's just like anything. I talk about addictions. You may sort of innocently go to the refrigerator every night to get your beer, but you may not be aware of the tons of programming that's going on that's compelling you to do that because it's so unconscious. And laziness is the same thing, because although you may sit on the couch and think about the fact that you're lazy and want to do something about it, that doesn't mean that you've made contact with the actual drivers behind the laziness, the emotional stuff, because it's unconscious, like with the addiction. I thought, well, here's a wake-up call, but I thought that, okay, whatever procrastination or laziness is going on for me, if I just awaken to my true nature, then I'll be in the flow, like Eckhart talks about. I'll be inspired, and I'll be moving in the world and doing this and that. And although there was some of that in the beginning, like awakening to true nature, the burden of self lifted, it's like there was flow. However, there was unconsciousness that had not been resolved yet, so the laziness and the procrastination and the sense of being kind of stuck came back. I've talked about this, leaving teaching for 5 years, essentially leaving for 5 years, because there were some things that I needed to discover and inquire into, and this is one of them. The lack of flow that started to show up around 2013 actually. That was actually repression in childhood patterns that hadn't been resolved, but I didn't see that until I did the repression work. So what I want to say to you now is that we have this repression work, and it can go straight to the heart of the procrastination and laziness and show you how it's an emotional issue. Let me give you just a taste of it. So I want you just to visualize in awareness something that you think you're supposed to be doing right now, but you're not doing, like paying these bills, going and buying this, making that call to the doctor you've been meaning to do. Put that thing up, the image that represents this task that you haven't done yet, that you're procrastinating on. Here's just a simple way to see it. What deficiency story comes up for you as you look at this task that you're not able to complete? What does that mean about who you are? Just ask that question and see what comes up. And if some words come up in awareness, just let them be there first. But if it's like a self-identity, like, I can't do it, or there's something wrong with me, or anything, just reverse that now. So as you're looking at that task that you haven't done, just reverse what came up there. So there's nothing wrong with me. Or, I can do it. I'm going to do it right now. See, you're reversing it. I can do the task right now. Say that and see what comes up. Whatever you reverse, just see what comes up. Observe and allow what comes up as objections, basically. Look for the objections when you say, I can do this task right now. Or, I'm not deficient. There's nothing wrong with me. And then watch. And just, this is the easy part, really. Just watch and allow from awareness. Let it all be there, one arising at a time. See and allow. Now let me add on an inquiry here that gets to repression. So I want you to look back at that task. Or actually just look at your life. Just whatever represents your life. And then just feel into your inner body and say, I don't have to hold my life energy back. I don't have to hold myself back in life. And see if something comes up to object to that. Like, yes, I do. Or some sensation in the body. Feel that? Holding back. That speaks to repression. The literal holding back of our life energy, like to protect ourselves, really. So again, feel into the inner body where you're holding a contraction or pain. Look at your life where you're maybe not doing all the things you want to do. And just say, I don't have to hold my energy back. I don't have to hold myself back in life. Feel if there's any response. If it's just an energetic response in the body, ask, what does this energy have to say here in the mind? The point is you want to see the mind here, the objections of the mind, and just let them be. Even if it's just like a yes, I have to hold myself back, then let that be, those words. Seeing and allowing them. Okay, so I'm just showing you these. I'm not taking you through all these. So if you want to just stay and witness what came up there, turn the video off, rejoin me in a second. But I want to talk to you because this is if something came up for you here, this is an example of how KI brings stuff up that you can't normally see. So you might be sitting on your couch procrastinating, but you can't see the programming because you don't have that skill yet. And this is why I say on here that to be with what is isn't enough. So just to live in awareness and assume that everything's going to appear to you can actually keep you procrastinating and lazy. That lack of skill there, it doesn't sound like a lack of skill. It sounds very clear, like I'm the awakeness and everything arises and falls to me. But if that were true, then why didn't all this stuff that you just saw come up, that sensation or these words that just came up with the inquiry, why don't those just come up for you to see every day when you're procrastinating? Because if you could see it and just be with it, if it was just naturally arising, it would eventually let go of you, like all conditioning. But notice that that doesn't happen. And here's the danger with the presence practices and the non-dual thing is, as you awaken to true nature, there can be a sense, a very strong sense, that there's nobody here and there's nowhere to go, nothing to do. And all that's a clear seeing, and it sort of brings you into this, the restfulness and completeness of the present moment, for sure. There's that. But if you have unresolved stuff, emotional stuff, like the kind of stuff that we just brought up, and by the way, the stuff that just came up often has roots in childhood, like deficiency stories from childhood, and these repressions are from childhood. So the problem is that this whole presence thing gets enmeshed with prior programming that's still there. So the repression of our life energy, the deficiency stories that are really unconscious, other assumptions and programming doesn't show itself. It doesn't arise to awareness. And so instead we increasingly may see, oh, there's no one here and there's nothing to do. And that's peaceful. But at the same time, we can't move. Can't move. That's totally different than I'm free to move, but I'm just going to be here. When I had you do that inquiry, I don't have to hold back my life energy. I don't have to hold myself back. If you got a response that indicates, yes, I do, that's what I mean. That isn't presence. That's old conditioning that is now perhaps even being meshed in with the presence. So as you're doing awareness-based work, again, there can be a settling in and like, this is it. There's just this moment. Rest as that. And underneath the surface, a repression of energy, unconscious programming that is still running the show, creating a sort of inertia, like I can't move. People get into some really bad places with this. Quite often I'm having a session with someone and they're telling me, like, I followed non-duality, I meditated for years, I had this experience, that experience, and now I'm just sitting in my room and I don't want to do anything. I don't want to do anything. And then the mind can justify that and say, well, yeah, because what is there to do? It's all ego anyway. And it justifies and actually tries to explain away a repression or a trauma-based response to life. There's research about this now. Go Google procrastination, laziness, emotions, trauma. Or you could add in emotional regulation, and you're going to see a slew of studies and articles. Mainly articles. There's a few studies linking procrastination directly to trauma, actually. But there's a lot of articles about how it's really an emotional regulation issue. So there's some energies in our life that we haven't allowed to come forth. And so they're stuck in our bodies. Life energy, emotion, held down. And that makes us feel inert or unable to move. That's what repression does. So when you're waking up to true nature and you have this repression going on into the background, you can literally feel like you can't move. And people stay in that state for a while, not knowing what's going on. And some people staying there for years and lose their income or whatever. This is actually very prevalent, much more prevalent than you might think. The thing is you have got to be careful with the non-dual thing and the presence thing. And if you're not resolving some of these unconscious patterns in the body, because you can literally wake up into inertia. Wake up and then unable to move. There's no flow. The inspiration may not be there for you to move in life, the enthusiasm. And then you may be telling yourself that this is just what awakening is like. And that is not what awakening is like. That is just what your experience is. The difficulty I have working with people in this state is that their mind will continue to tell them that Again, there's nothing to do and no one to do it. And they use that programming to kind of like cover up the repression and the deficiency story. Just literally cover it up. This programming, spiritual programming comes through, and that can solidify the repression actually for a while. It's just because it's like blind yourself. Just blind yourself from it. Here, you have to do the deeper somatic work like we were doing to pull up the energetic programs that create the inertia and inquire into that and see the programming. If you can't see it, if it's hiding down in the body like that, then you're probably going to stay procrastinating and lazy for a while, especially if you're telling yourself the non-dual stuff, right, on top of that. This is not a pleasant place for people to be, unable to really move in the world. Now that we have the science and the articles, we don't have to just say, okay, this is woo-woo. Like what Scott is saying sounds good, but kind of like conjecture. I don't know. Go read about it. Because one of the great things about science is that it's studying things before necessarily we've caught on to them. Like it's been studying repression, emotional repression, while many of us didn't even know that that was actually behind our chronic pain or our illness. They were studying it. So they were studying how trauma drives addiction before the behavioral health field really caught on to that. Now they're studying procrastination and laziness and connecting it to emotions. So we should be paying attention because this is unconscious for us, humans. We don't see the programming behind procrastination and laziness. Or maybe we see some of it, but we don't see it all, and so it stays in place. Science is there trying to wake us up to our own experience. But we can't wake up by reading the studies. We read the studies to then point back to our experience. And here with KI, we've created inquiries to get to the repression and to the emotional stuff under the laziness and procrastination. That's the real work there. And that's what I'm inviting people to do is, again, come to the members area and just listen to us talk about inquiry and how it gets to these areas. You may find that we are giving you a pathway you never had before. If you notice something about me, anything but lazy now. So I had a 5-year period after about 5 or 6 years of just living in my true nature initially, where there was quite a bit of flow and movement. I became unable to move for a while. In other words, you didn't see a video from me for almost like 5 years. And I wasn't really interested in working with people. Something was happening with me, which was that the inertia of that childhood emotional stuff was coming to the surface slowly. The first thing that it did was just stopped me. So whatever flow was there, it just kind of came to a halt. And I didn't want to do much of anything. Now later, come to find out, there was anger repression and other repression there, and I did that work. So the Scott Kiloby you see now is free of that and just moving, like, and happy, like more joyful than ever, more in the flow, completely enthused. It's like my work is my play. And that's a really good place to be, folks, like to live like that. And it's very different than that inertia that I experience. So this is why I come on, because it's like, if you don't know this, like being awareness or recognizing awareness won't show it to you. Because I lived for many years in procrastination and laziness and couldn't get under that. It's like I couldn't pull the hood up and see, what is this? What's actually driving this? Again, because I was resting as awareness. That's both a brilliant thing to do for yourself, like to rest as your true nature, and it can be the way that you kind of further fall into unconsciousness where you actually don't even think there's anything there to inquire into. You know, I'm just telling myself like, well, this is just how awareness shows up in laziness every day. Just telling ourselves these things. I had to do the deeper work around all of this because I learned a while back that not everything arises to awareness. It really doesn't. And this is one example because there's many people out there who are feeling very lazy and unable to move, and they're doing a lot of meditation, or they recognize their true nature. They see everything appears to that awareness, comes and goes. That's their experience, at least. And just lazy and procrastinating. And then coming back to awareness, as if that's just going to show it to you, but it doesn't. And so you stay lazy. You stay on the couch. See what I'm saying? But yet you recognize your true nature. Things are pretty peaceful. Still lazy, procrastinating. No judgment on that, because I've had that, I know. But what's going on there? See? And this is not something that you can think yourself out of very well. And it's not something that you can rest your way out of. Just rest as awareness. Because again, this stuff doesn't want to arise. This is emotional regulation issue. Childhood patterning, trauma response. Our laziness is actually a trauma response. Because if I don't take action in the world, then I don't get hurt. I stay safe. If I don't go out of my house, I don't have to get rejected. If I don't take a chance in life, I don't fail. So this is protecting us, all this unconscious stuff, and so we just sit there. I think a lot of people are surprised when they awaken to their true nature to find out they can't move much. It's not the awareness, it's the repression that you can't see, the unconscious programming. The thing is you don't have to hear anything that I'm saying. That's the beauty of this. You can just sit there for months, years, however long, unable to move. Hopefully you'll survive financially, because that's an issue for certain people. But if you ignore this, it could be to your own detriment, frankly. Of course, in the absolute sense, who cares if you sit around for 10 years and do nothing? Absolute sense. But this is our human life. I mean, this is our life as we're embodied. And these things do matter. You know, it matters on the level of form, whether I can move and feel free and in a flow and enjoying life versus awake but inertia, unable to move. There's a big difference between those two things. And if you just sort of resign yourself to, this is just how it is, then, like, in other words, this is what's appearing to awareness, laziness, which you hear a lot, that whole thing, like, this is just appearing to awareness. First of all, it's not appearing to awareness. What's appearing to awareness is the actual physical body not wanting to move and not getting things done. But the programming is not coming to awareness, because if the programming came up in awareness, it would then fall away and you would see that that's not you, and you'd be able to move more. So by saying this is just laziness appearing in awareness is one of the ways in which we just hide this stuff from ourselves and stay stuck there. What I'm so excited about with KI is it gave me pathways into seeing things that I couldn't see before. So the flow happening in my life is not from the recognition of awareness. That was the foundation. The flow that you're seeing is unearthing this unconscious material and energy that's stuck in the body. That's where the flow comes from. And people have been saying this to me recently, like, how do you do everything that you do? Because you're training all these people, you're training other people in repression, you're doing videos, you do sessions. I'm able to do this because of the inquiries. I don't know how else to say that. Because 5 years ago, I would just sit there. I don't want to do a video. I don't really want to inquire with anyone. I don't want to talk about non-duality. I wasn't depressed. It was just inertia. So I know that state. And some people are really wanting to get out in the world and, like, be the expression of themselves. Like, they have this some desire inside to, like, I want to go do this. I want to open a flower shop. I want to learn how to play this instrument. I want to be a teacher. I want to help people. I want to go back to school. But they can't. And when they awaken to true nature, when they find that inertia, it's very confusing. because they're told that in that life's just living you in the flow, but it doesn't happen. So it's painful to sit there with some desire to express yourself in the world, but you can't, holding yourself back. And then maybe even judging yourself as procrastinating or lazy because you still don't see that it's an emotional issue. It's held in your body and it's unconscious. I have a friend close to me who can't get off the couch. Literally. He can't get a job. He hasn't had a job for many years. It's clearly an emotional issue, trauma. If I say anything to him, and I don't, because I know how it works, if I say to him, you're being lazy, you need to get out there, what that does is it reinforces it. This is an emotional issue. So the ego mechanism hears things like that, and it just can reinforce it. Now, thankfully, my friend is starting to open up to inquiry and seeing changes in that. But that's the whole thing. It's like there's this whole thing by trying to get people to do something, or other people trying to get you to do something, actually feels like external pressure, and it can solidify the patterning there. It has to come from within. So it can start with just little inquiries. If you come to the members area, I'll show you what I mean by little inquiries around procrastination and laziness. Just starting with a simple inquiry that gets your body up to do something today that you wouldn't have been able to do until you inquired into it. Just little things like that, and then watching how that changes your life. Like, oh yeah, with pretty easily I was able just to go get this done today. And then staying in that inquiry for a while to unravel the patterns that keep you feeling inert, and so that your body can just move in simple ways first. Not like doing one inquiry and now you can fulfill your life's purpose or something, but just movement. Working with the stagnancy of your body. Little inquiries that you don't even have to get up and move after that. When you do an inquiry that's really deep, you just move. You don't have to think about it anymore. That's the thing about being in the flow. There's very little thought about what I'm doing and what I'm going to be doing. Unless it's just like, oh, I have a session now. I have to go upstairs, and it's like that. But there's no sense of I'm trying to get myself to do anything. Nothing like that. There's no pressure from within to do anything. But there's also no block to doing anything. See? So it's just movement. Movement that happens naturally. You can say life just living me, but movement. When you do the inquiry, it'll be like that. It'll be like, because you're sitting on the couch, you're doing nothing, and the programming, self-judgment is there, and that's helping stop you, obviously, from moving. As you do the inquiry, that clears up and movement happens naturally towards what you want, towards where you feel drawn to go, without thinking about it. I mean, not much thinking about it at all, just move. If you don't experience that, where life is moving you, just moving you, and you're not holding back. If you've never experienced that, it could be because of the unconscious programming that's there. Come to the members area and just give it a try. And if you come to one of my meetings in the members area, bring the subject up, because we don't talk about it every day. But just say, Scott, I watched your video on procrastination and laziness. Can you help me with this? And I'll show you how to inquire into that. Killaby.com. Go to the top, scroll down menu, go to Killaby members area. That's where all this work is being done. It isn't really done publicly, but it's in the members area. Join us.